Good afternoon and welcome to my show, Justice Matters. I have with me today the great pleasure of introducing Michael Kaufman, who's a staff attorney with the ACLU. The ACLU is the American Civil Liberties Union. Michael, thank you so much for being on my show today. If you could introduce yourself to the community, I'd appreciate that.
Well, it's great to be here, Patty. Thank you for having me. My name is Michael Kaufman. I'm a staff attorney at the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union of Southern California, based in Los Angeles. I work on a variety of civil rights issues, focusing primarily on immigrants' rights issues.
And Michael and I are here to discuss just a little, because not all the guidelines have come out, on the new initiative that the President announced on November 20th, 2014, wherein he faced the nation and spoke to us about how he is going to set different priorities for immigrants, for the immigrant population. In particular, he announced an expansion of DACA for the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, and he also talked about what we now, in our circle of attorneys community, called DAPA. And DAPA stands for Deferred Action for Parental Accountability, and that's for parents of U.S. citizen children and parents of lawful permanent resident children who are here in the United States. These parents now will be able to apply for some sort of protection, if you will. Michael, can you discuss that just a little bit more about what DAPA will do?
Yeah, so the key thing that's happening here is this program known as Deferred Action. What Deferred Action does is essentially two things. One, it says that the administration won't attempt to deport you during the time period in which you have this deferred action. And secondly, and perhaps more importantly, it allows you, if you have that deferred action status, to get work authorization so that you can work lawfully here within the United States. So for the time period in which you have deferred action, you can apply to be work authorized and work in the United States with lawful status.
And with work authorization, of course, you can apply for a driver's license as well as a valid Social Security number.
Exactly, exactly.
Now, we don't know all the guidelines that have come out for DAPA, but do you know a little bit generally what, for example, you have to have a U.S. citizen child or a lawful permanent resident child, but does that child have to have been born before the announcement, or can the child be born now after the announcement? What do you know a little bit about that you can discuss it?
So we know in sort of broad strokes who the program will cover. Again, as you mentioned, it has to be a parent of a United States citizen child or someone who's a lawful permanent resident. And there are age cutoffs for that and time period cutoffs, and I would encourage people to wait until the program is fully fleshed out, the application process together, to get the details on that. Importantly, though, and unfortunately, it doesn't cover parents of DACA recipients, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. So if you're a parent and you have a child who got DACA, but none of your children are eligible for lawful permanent resident status or United States citizen, then you will not be eligible for the DAPA program. At the same time that the President announced, DAPA also expanded the DACA program. No longer will there be an age limit above which people would not be eligible. So if you'd come a long time ago as a child, under the old DACA program, you were not necessarily eligible to get deferred action. They've eliminated those age limits now. And so additional many thousands of people actually are going to be eligible not only under the DAPA program, but also under the expanded DACA program. Again, people should wait till the exact rules are announced and the application process announced to figure out exactly if they qualify and how to go about applying.
And that's particularly true because until there are the final strokes made to the law and actually how the process is going to work, we really don't know all the particulars involved. But we have heard that the applications will open up 6 months after the President announced the initiative. So 6 months after November 20th puts us somewhere in June of 2015. We should receive some more guidelines from USCIS and hopefully the date and when the applications will be open. Let's talk about one thing, though, in particular, I think that we can discuss in relationship to DAPA, and that is, it's pretty clear, though, you would have had to have a U.S. citizen child or lawful permanent resident child prior to the announcement on November 20th.
Absolutely.
I have an interesting question to propose to you, and one that I'm kind of passionate about, because it was a question that a client of mine asked me. What if the client was pregnant at the time the announcement was made, but the child is being born afterwards? Excellent question, because there is law and our Constitution supports the notion that a child is a child at conception. What do you think about a situation like that? Something interesting for the ACLU to get involved, or you get a denial on a DAPA?
Yeah, that's an interesting one I hadn't heard before. So off the top of my head, I don't know the answer to that. It might be one of the things that's answered when they spell out the regulations and a little bit more about the processes. It may be one of those things that'll have to be sorted out as people apply and we see who they approve and deny. That's an interesting one, though.
What about stepchildren?
Stepchildren, I also don't know the rules on that. Again, I think we'll have to wait to see the particulars.
And I think that's correct. I think there is a lot of questions that have yet to be addressed and answered by the government in USCIS in this situation, in terms of what are all these particular different scenarios and how will it all play out. And certainly when the application process is open up, if you have these kind of questions, to consult a licensed attorney, certainly not a notario or an immigration consultant. But at this time, there is no application process. So if you are, would you agree with me that if you are being approached or being told, oh, you know, hire me at this price and I will start preparing you for the deferred action for parents, that would be not right? Yeah,
if you hear from somebody that they are going to apply for you right now, or they can get you the deferred action status in the next month, something's wrong there, because the application is not yet available. We're still waiting on the particularities of the program. We know from the DACA program that there were a lot of scams out there, a lot of fraud being unfortunately inflicted on a vulnerable community here who thought they had an opportunity to get in a benefit, and people preyed upon them and took advantage of them. And that's unfortunately likely going to happen again with the millions of people who may qualify under DAPA. So we just urge people to be cautious, to be vigilant, to try to find a trusted immigration attorney or a nonprofit agency. In Los Angeles, there are a number of them that will be offering services to make sure that they're getting the right information. And they can also, there is information publicly available through government websites about how to spot fraud, and if you think you have, to report it. And we really encourage people to do that. If you or someone you know has been taken advantage of, it's really important to bring those people to the attention of the authorities so we can put an end to it before other people are taken advantage of.
And that's so important to keep emphasizing, because the immigrant population unfortunately does get taken advantage of.
Yeah.
And so we're here to tell you that there is no application process available. So there's nothing to apply for at this time. So you shouldn't be paying anyone for any services related to this new initiative that the President talked about. You yourself can do the very minimal things of starting to gather documents with a date and your name that show or indicate that you've been living in the United States for a significant period of time. I think the date that the President announced under DAPA, and as you mentioned, we don't have all the details yet, is you have to show that you were here on or before January 1st, 2010.
Right.
And so that again expands DACA as well. And so that's the parameter date that you can use to start gathering documents. And for that, you don't need a lawyer to do that.
That's right. And I think that's something that we encourage people to start doing now, to start gathering those documents. We know from our experience with DACA that can be a very difficult thing to do, to establish a residence going years back. It might take hunting down some old paperwork. It might be going to the bank and getting old bank statements, old bills, documents that might be with former spouses, that sort of thing. It can take a while, but those can be crucial to establishing your residence going back to the period that will qualify you. And so we encourage people to start today. We don't need to know what the application is to say exactly to know that you can safely begin gathering those documents, because they are going to be useful to you in the process.
And you certainly don't need a lawyer
No.
or a consultant or a notary to gather your own documents. So
That's right.
Please don't pay anyone to do that for you. One important thing that I do want to talk about a little bit is I get many questions about, well, do you think the Republicans will do anything to stop DAPA from happening? And we've heard among the community, among lawyers, that there has been a lawsuit that I don't know if it's been filed or there's an intention to file a lawsuit in certain states against the President's initiative. What, if any, effect, in your opinion, could that have?
So that lawsuit has actually been filed. It was filed by a number of states, I think like 20-something states, trying to declare that the Deferred Action Program is unlawful and attempting to put a stop to it. And we expect there will probably be other lawsuits that are filed in the future. I think any initiative like this that affects this many people, that generated as much controversy than it is, people are going to try to find any way they can to stop it. But I think if you look at the claims that are being made in that lawsuit, it's very unlikely that any court is going to find that the president wasn't acting fully within his lawful discretion to use the deferred action the way that he did. Now, there are political things that can happen through Congress. They might try to put funding constraints on it. They may try to do other things, even try to impeach the president, let's say. I don't think it'll come to that. But there are political processes that they can rely on. But I don't think the courts are going to be very receptive to slowing down or putting a stop to this program, as the president has done here what presidents going back many, many years, decades and decades have done, which is to use deferred action to provide some relief to certain categories of vulnerable immigrants in the United States. This is simply an expansion of the type of authority that presidents have used for years and years and years.
And I think that's an excellent point to end on. We actually don't know what's going to happen. So until the applications are open and don't pay anyone for anything, any services related to DAPA, or if you're now eligible for DACA, I think you have to wait 90 days after the announcement if you're now eligible under the expanded DACA requirements. Would that be fair to say?
I think that's correct.
But see a licensed attorney who can actually explain this a little bit further. But in terms of what will happen if the president leaves, or what political motives the Republicans may have, we can't really speak to that. But until the fat lady sings, this is the proposal. So we look forward to having many more immigrants being able to work in the United States lawfully and to make good lives for their kids, and not fear that they are going to be deported and be separated from the families. So Michael, again, thank you so much for joining me on my show and briefly discussing this new initiative that the president announced. If there are violations, or if there are discriminations against the immigrant community, or if the immigrant community have further questions that they may want to seek advice from the ACLU or members from its staff, how can they get a hold of you?
We encourage people to report to us if you're having issues of discrimination with respect to deferred action or other issues more generally related to your immigration status. The easiest way to find us is through our website. It's www.aclusocal.org.
Thank you, Michael. And if anyone has any further questions in regards to what we discussed today, please feel free to contact me at patricia.m.corrales@gmail.com, or you may contact me at my office at area 626-791-1434. Thank you so much for joining us on this show, and we wish everyone a very happy holidays.